The neighbors often said they were made for each other. Imran, at 32, was the kind of man people respected. Steady, hard-working, a small business owner who had built his modest shop in Karachi brick by brick. And beside him, always dressed neatly with a soft smile, was his wife Aisha, just 27, graceful, polite, and the kind of woman who could make even the most ordinary gathering feel brighter. At weddings, they looked like the couple everyone else wanted to be. At family dinners, Aisha spoke softly, letting Imran's louder voice carry the conversations. On the outside, they seemed to embody stability, a middle-class pair who had carved out their own corner of happiness. But happiness, like glass, can look perfect even as cracks run through it. Behind closed doors, Imran's steady voice often turned sharp. He had rules, unspoken, yet enforced. Aisha should not stay out too late. She should not spend too much on clothes, even though her eyes often lingered on the glittering displays in Clifton boutiques. She should not question his late nights at the shop. In his mind, these were reasonable boundaries. In hers, they were chains tightening by the day. Aisha was not rebellious by nature, but she was young, restless, and full of unspoken dreams. She scrolled through Instagram at night, staring at the polished lives of influencers in Dubai, London, and New York. Women who wore designer dresses, women who dined in places she could only whisper about. Beside her, Imran slept with the peace of a man who believed his world was enough. Sometimes, when he caught her scrolling, he would frown. "Why waste time looking at these people?" he asked once, half asleep. "Because it's beautiful," she murmured, almost to herself. Imran turned over. "Fairy tales don't pay bills. Go to sleep." The words stung more than she let on. Their life was not miserable, at least not in ways one could point to clearly. They had a 2-bedroom apartment, a small car, and savings for the future. But where Imran saw security, Aisha saw limitation. He was content with enough, while she quietly craved more. Tension seeped into small moments. At dinner, when she suggested trying a new restaurant, Imran dismissed it as wasteful. When she asked about traveling, he laughed it off. "Foreign trips are for rich people, Aisha. We live in the real world." Each time she swallowed her disappointment, her smile slipping a little further from her eyes. And yet, part of her still loved him. He was reliable, caring in his own way, and proud of being the man who could provide. But love mixed with frustration is a dangerous brew. It does not explode instantly. It simmers, boiling hotter with every unspoken word, every stifled desire. One evening, after yet another family function where Imran's jokes made her the subject of laughter, Aisha sat silently in their bedroom. He thought she was sulking. In truth, she was imagining a different life, one where she was not confined by her husband's rules, where she could dress as she pleased, go where she wished, and be admired not for patience, but for presence. Imran walked in, loosening his tie. "You're too sensitive, Aisha. People laugh, that's all. Don't take everything so seriously." She nodded, saying nothing. Inside, something small but irreversible cracked. To outsiders, they were still the perfect couple. Inside their home, invisible walls were rising. Walls that neither of them could see clearly yet, but ones that would soon trap them both in choices impossible to undo. Aisha's eyes drifted again to her phone that night, to the lives of women who seemed to float in silk and gold. She imagined herself there, far from the heat and dust of Karachi, far from Imran's disapproving frown. It was a dream she had no plan, for at least not yet. But dreams have a way of opening doors, especially when whispered to the wrong listener. And in Aisha's life, the first whisper of temptation was just around the corner. Aisha's restless scrolling one evening brought a familiar name to her screen. Sana, an old college friend she had not spoken to in years. The profile photo stunned her. Sana draped in designer clothes, standing in front of a luxury car, with the glittering skyline of Dubai rising behind her. Aisha hesitated before clicking send message. It felt almost childish, like peeking into a world she had no right to enter. But curiosity overcame doubt. "Sana, it's been so long. How are you?" The reply came within minutes, warm and enthusiastic. Soon the two were talking as if no time had passed. Sana described her life in Dubai: dinners on yachts, weekend shopping at designer malls, circles of businessmen and wealthy families where everything shimmered with money and power. Aisha read every message with equal parts awe and envy. The more Sana shared, the more Aisha compared. Her own small apartment seemed shabbier, Imran's frugal dinners duller, and her routines emptier. During one late-night exchange, Sana teased her gently. "You always wanted the finer things, Aisha. You'd love it here. Dubai isn't just a city. It's another universe. But you need connections. The right people open the right doors." Those words stayed with Aisha. The right people. The right doors. Soon after, Sana forwarded her a private social media link. "He's a friend of mine," she explained. "Sheikh Khalid. He's generous, powerful. If he takes an interest in you, life changes." Aisha opened the profile. The man in the photos radiated wealth, tailored suits, gold watches, Arabian palaces as his backdrop. His smile carried a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Yet there was something magnetic about it, something that pulled her in despite herself. For days she debated, her conscience and desire warring silently. Finally, curiosity won. She sent a polite greeting. The response was immediate. "Beautiful name." "A beautiful face. Who are you, Aisha?" It began innocently, as all forbidden things do. Small compliments, short exchanges. But soon the chats grew longer, slipping into late nights when Imran was asleep beside her. Khalid's words dripped with charm and promise. He spoke of Dubai as a kingdom of possibility, of women who were adored instead of silenced, of a life free of petty restrictions. "You deserve more than ordinary, Aisha," he wrote one night. "I can give you more." No man had ever spoken to her that way. Imran gave her stability, yes, but not wonder, not desire. And here was a man, powerful and untouchable, painting her a vision of herself as someone extraordinary. Still, guilt gnawed at her. Some nights she would shut off her phone, curl into bed, and whisper to herself, "Stop, this is wrong." But the next evening, the phone called to her again, and Khalid was waiting. Their conversations grew bolder. He asked about her marriage, about her dreams, about the things she was afraid to admit aloud. Slowly she confessed her dissatisfaction, her longing for freedom, her hunger for a life that felt like more than survival. Khalid listened, or at least pretended to. Then he made his first offer. "Come to Dubai, just for a visit. Let me show you what life can be when you're treated like a queen instead of a prisoner." Her heart raced at the suggestion. She typed and erased her reply 3 times before leaving the message unanswered. But in her silence, the temptation burrowed deeper. The next morning she avoided Imran's eyes at breakfast. His routine complaints about bills and business felt smaller than ever, like noise in the background of a bigger, brighter song only she could hear. For the first time, her loyalty trembled. The perfect couple had already cracked. Now, with a single invitation across the sea, Aisha was beginning to wonder if her entire life was here had been nothing more than a cage waiting to be escaped. And the cage door was beginning to swing open. The evening began like so many others, dull, predictable, heavy with the weight of unspoken grievances. Aisha had prepared dinner, but Imran came home late, tired and irritable. He barely touched the food before launching into complaints about his day. "You don't understand the pressure I face," he snapped, slamming his glass onto the table. "Running a business isn't easy. You sit at home, and you think life is just about fancy clothes and traveling." His words struck deeper than he realized. They echoed every hidden argument she'd been having in her own head, every comparison she made between her life and the glittering world Khalid had described. Her voice trembled as she answered, "Maybe I want more than just sitting at home. Maybe I want to live, Imran." He looked up sharply. "Live? This is living. A roof, food, respect. You're ungrateful, Aisha. Do you know how many women would envy what you have?" The argument spiraled, bitter words stacking like stones in a wall that now separated them. Aisha's cheeks burned with frustration. Imran's voice grew louder, dismissive, until silence fell between them like a heavy curtain. That night, while Imran slept soundly, Aisha sat awake, staring at the dim glow of her phone. Khalid's last message lingered on the screen. "You deserve to be adored. Come to me. I will show you life as it should be." Her pulse quickened. For weeks she had toyed with the idea, pushing it aside as fantasy. But tonight, after Imran's cutting words, fantasy felt like a doorway, and she was ready to step through. By dawn her decision was made. She moved quietly, packing only essentials into a small suitcase. Jewelry Imran had given her, some clothes, her passport she had kept tucked away. Each item felt like a betrayal, but also like a lifeline. On the dresser she left a single sheet of paper. Her handwriting shook as she wrote, "I need to find myself. Don't look for me." It was cruel in its vagueness, but she couldn't bear to explain. She couldn't bear to see his face when he realized she had chosen another life over him. When the call to prayer echoed across Karachi, Aisha was already in the back of a taxi, suitcase pressed to her lap. The streets were still sleepy, unaware that a marriage was unraveling in the shadows of the city. At the airport, her hands trembled as she handed over her passport. Once the boarding pass was in her grip, a strange calm washed over her. It was done. The door had opened. Imran woke to silence. At first, he assumed she was in the kitchen, but the apartment felt different, emptier, colder. When he found the note, his stomach twisted. He read it once, then again, his hands shaking. Fury collided with disbelief. He stormed through the apartment, searching for her, as if she might be hiding in a corner. When reality settled in, humiliation cut deepest. His wife had left him, without warning, without explanation, making him a fool in front of the world. He crushed the note in his fist, shouting into the empty room. But the walls gave no answers. Meanwhile, Aisha's plane lifted into the sky. She pressed her forehead against the window, watching Karachi shrink beneath her. Her heart pounded with both terror and exhilaration. She whispered to herself, "This is it. My new life begins now." Dubai awaited. A glittering promise, a dream painted gold. As the plane cut through the clouds, she allowed herself to believe she was stepping into a fairy tale. But even fairy tales have shadows, and Aisha was already walking toward hers. The moment Aisha stepped out of Dubai International Airport, she felt as though she had walked into another world. The glass, the steel, the endless luxury. It was everything Khalid had promised, and everything Imran had denied. For the first time in years, she felt alive. A sleek black car waited for her outside, a driver holding a placard with her name. She climbed in, heart pounding, clutching her handbag as if it could anchor her to reality. The ride was silent, smooth, a glide through highways lined with towers of silver and gold. When the car turned into Khalid's estate, her breath caught. The gates alone were larger than her entire apartment building back in Karachi. Beyond them stretched manicured lawns, fountains that danced under colored lights, and finally, a mansion that seemed carved from marble itself. Inside, everything gleamed. Chandeliers spilled light like waterfalls, silk drapes swayed in the air conditioning, and servants bowed as she passed. It felt like entering a dream, or perhaps a film, where she had been cast in a role too glamorous to be her own. And then Khalid appeared. He was taller in person, his presence commanding the room before he even spoke. His suit was flawless, his cologne sharp and intoxicating. He greeted her with a smile that was both warm and calculating, kissing her hand as though she were royalty. "My queen has finally arrived," he said softly. The days that followed blurred into indulgence. Khalid took her on private yacht rides where the sea stretched endlessly, its horizon kissing the sky. He draped her in gowns she had only ever admired from behind glass. He led her through glittering malls where she could choose anything, and he paid without a glance. Everywhere she went, people looked at her differently, like she belonged to a higher world now. It was intoxicating. Aisha floated on the luxury, her heart swelling with the belief that she had been right to leave, that she had chosen the life she deserved. But slowly, the shine began to dull. One evening, when she mentioned wanting to explore the city alone, Khalid's smile faded. "Why would you need to go out without me?" he asked, voice smooth but edged with steel. I wanted to see the markets, the city streets," she explained carefully. He shook his head. "Dubai is not safe for a woman alone. If you wish to see something, tell me. I will arrange it." The next day she noticed her phone was different. Apps had been rearranged, settings changed. When she asked about it, Khalid brushed it off. "Don't worry, Habibti. I've installed protection, so I always know you are safe." Protection. The word lingered uneasily. Servants watched her constantly, their eyes polite but sharp. If she lingered by the gates, someone always appeared to ask if she needed something. When she tried to call Sana, Khalid appeared minutes later, smiling but questioning. "What do you talk about so much with your old friend?" The more he indulged her with gifts, the more he closed in around her. Aisha realized that the palace was not a home. It was a gilded cage. The walls sparkled, but they trapped her all the same. One night, lying in a bed bigger than her entire living room back in Karachi, she stared at the ceiling, unease spreading like poison. She remembered Imran's sharp words, his controlling ways, and wondered bitterly, had she escaped one prison, only to enter another? The thought haunted her, but she pushed it aside. After all, this was still paradise, wasn't it? Khalid loved her, provided for her, promised her the world. Surely this was just how powerful men behaved. Surely this was still the dream she had chosen. Yet, deep down, Aisha felt the first flicker of fear, a whisper that told her the fairy tale was not what it seemed. And soon, the whistle purr would grow louder. The glittering palace no longer dazzled Aisha the way it had when she first arrived. The chandeliers, the silks, the gold-trimmed walls. All of it now felt like props in a theatre built to distract her from the truth. And the truth was simple. She was being watched. She noticed it first in the servants. Their smiles were polite, but their eyes lingered too long, their questions too precise. "Do you need anything, madam?" they would ask, appearing the moment she stepped into the garden or lingered near the doors. At first she thought it was courtesy. Now she understood it was surveillance. Even her phone betrayed her. Calls dropped strangely. Notifications appeared that she hadn't opened, and whenever she spoke to Sana, Khalid would appear minutes later, as if summoned by some invisible signal. One evening, when Khalid was away at a business dinner, she finally allowed herself to whisper her fear. She dialed Sana's number with trembling fingers. "Sana," she breathed when the call connected. "Something is wrong here." Her friend's voice was hushed, wary. "I was waiting for you to say it. Aisha, you need to be careful. Khalid isn't the man he shows in public. He's powerful, yes, but dangerous." Aisha clutched the phone tighter. "Dangerous how?" Sana hesitated. "I've heard stories. Women who came here like you, thinking they'd found paradise. At first he treats them like queens. But when they question him or try to leave, things happen. They disappear, and no one dares ask where they've gone. The words struck Aisha like ice water. She looked around the massive bedroom, at the heavy velvet curtains, at the locked doors, and felt the walls closing in. "Are you saying," her voice cracked, "that I'm trapped?" "I'm saying you should trust your instincts," Sana replied. "If you feel like you're being watched, you probably are." That night, Aisha couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of shadow in the hallway made her flinch. She kept replaying Sana's warning, women who disappear. The next morning, when Khalid returned, his charm was as smooth as ever. He kissed her cheek, showered her with gifts, spoke of future travels together. But beneath the silk of his words, she now heard steel. His affection felt like a leash. Desperate, she reached for something familiar. Imran. She hadn't spoken to her husband since the day she left Karachi, but the urge to hear his voice overwhelmed her. Late one night, when Khalid slept heavily beside her, she crept into the bathroom with her phone. Her fingers shook as she dialed the number she knew by heart. It rang once, twice. Then his voice, weary but achingly familiar. "Hello?" Her throat closed. For a moment she couldn't breathe. So many words crowded her chest. Apologies, explanations, pleas for help, but none came out. All she could manage was silence, broken only by her shallow breathing. "Aisha," Imran's voice sharpened. "Is that you? Where are you? Say something." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She opened her mouth, but the words refused to form. Finally she hung up, pressing the phone to her chest as if it could stop her heart from breaking. The next morning, Khalid was already waiting in the dining hall, eyes sharper than usual. He smiled, but it didn't reach his gaze. "You look tired," he said softly. "Strange dreams?" Aisha forced a smile, but inside, dread coiled like a snake. She knew he suspected something. The palace that once felt like a fairy tale now loomed like a fortress. And with each passing day, the whispers of fear in her mind grew louder, until they drowned out everything else. 2 months slipped by in Dubai, and in that span, the rhythm of Aisha's life became an uneasy routine. At first, the glittering walls of Khalid's palace still dazzled her, but the suffocating presence of his control pressed heavier each day. Then, without warning, the routine broke. Aisha vanished. Her absence was first noticed by a maid who brought her breakfast tray. The untouched bed, the silent phone, the closet door left slightly ajar, all spoke of a hurried departure. Within hours, whispers rippled through the household. Yet by the time her Dubai friend Sana heard of it, the story was already carefully packaged. "Madam has chosen a different life," one of Khalid's drivers said flatly, his eyes darting away. The staff seemed coached, every word mechanical, as if rehearsed. Sana's stomach knotted. She had been Aisha's only lifeline in this foreign city, the only person Aisha dared whisper her fears to. Just a week earlier, Aisha had confessed through trembling voice notes that she felt watched, like a prisoner in silk. Now, silence. No texts, no calls. For Aisha to cut contact so suddenly? Impossible. Something was wrong. With panic clawing at her chest, Sana did the only thing she could think of. She dialed Imran in Karachi. The line clicked, and she braced herself. She had heard the anger in Aisha's stories, the bitterness of their last fight. But she also remembered the tremor in Imran's voice whenever he spoke of his wife's disappearance. "Imran," she said quickly, before fear could paralyze her. "It's Aisha. She's gone." The silence on the other end was jagged. Then came a low, guttural exhale. "What do you mean, gone?" His voice cracked between disbelief and rage. "I don't know the details. Khalid's staff is saying she left on her own, but something feels wrong. They're too calm, too rehearsed. Hours later, Imran was pacing the departure lounge of Jinnah International Airport, his ticket to Dubai clutched in a sweating palm. His mind churned with fragments of their last argument, her note, the betrayal that had shattered him. He had told himself he hated her, that he had erased her from his heart. But hearing that she had vanished tore through every layer of anger, leaving only a raw, desperate love, or perhaps obsession. When his flight touched down in Dubai, he moved like a man possessed. He tracked down Sana within hours, grilling her for every detail, every last message, every nuance in Aisha's voice. Together, they drove to Khalid's mansion, the palace of promises that now loomed like a fortress of lies. The gates creaked open just enough for them to be ushered inside. Imran's chest tightened at the opulence, the marble floors, the gold accents, the sprawling chandeliers. But what froze him was the hollow perfection, as if every corner of the house had been scrubbed of Aisha's presence. When he demanded answers, Khalid's steward, a tall man with a clipped accent, gave a cool, almost practiced reply. Madam Aisha chose to leave. She wished for freedom. She took what she wanted and departed. We respect her choice. Choice? Imran spat. Where is she? Give me proof. The man's expression didn't flinch. There is no proof. There is only her decision. Imran's fists curled, fury bubbling, but Sana touched his arm, urging restraint. The staff's eyes followed their every movement, cold and assessing. It was clear. Pushing too hard here could end badly. As they left the mansion, Imran's gut twisted with certainty. This wasn't a woman walking away. This was a story written to erase her. Somewhere behind those gilded walls, or somewhere far worse, the truth was buried. Imran's vow hardened with each step back to the car. He would not stop until he found her. Whether she was alive, hidden, or silenced forever, he needed answers. And as night fell over Dubai's skyline, a darker possibility loomed. Aisha's vanishing was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of a dangerous hunt. The desert has a way of swallowing secrets, but sometimes it spits them back out in fragments too horrifying to ignore. 2 weeks after Aisha's disappearance, Dubai awoke to a nightmare splashed across every news channel. The discovery of a mutilated half-body, dumped in the vast emptiness outside the city. It was the lower half of a woman, wrapped with eerie precision in expensive silk fabric embroidered with gold thread. A fabric that screamed wealth, exclusivity, and cruelty. The police cordoned off the scene, but the desert wind carried whispers far beyond the dunes. Within hours, the story had spiraled into a media storm. Dismembered body found in Dubai desert, suspected to be foreign woman, blared one headline. Another dared to be more specific. Pakistani woman linked to Emirati Sheikh found dead. The city buzzed with speculation, and the world leaned in to listen. Imran's phone lit up like firecrackers that morning, calls from relatives, journalists, even anonymous voices demanding comment. He ignored most, his chest collapsing with every breath. He couldn't bring himself to answer, not until Sana appeared at his hotel room door, her face ashen. "They're saying it's Aisha." Her voice broke on the name. Imran grabbed the remote, flipping through channels, his hands trembling until they froze on an image. The silk fabric, blurred footage of investigators lifting the remains into a black bag, and the faint suggestion of painted toenails. He dropped the remote as if it had burned him. "No," he whispered. "No, not like this." But deep down he knew. The silk was too telling. He had seen Aisha wear such luxury in Khalid's palace, draped carelessly over her shoulders while she laughed on balconies. The thought of her body, wrapped now in the same decadence, butchered and discarded, sent bile clawing up his throat. By afternoon, the police confirmed partial identifies. Ication. It was her, or rather, half of her. DNA tests tied the remains to Aisha. The upper half of her body, however, was missing. Why only half? The question haunted the investigation, journalists and every household watching the unfolding drama. Some speculated it was a warning, a message to anyone who dared cross certain invisible lines of power. Others whispered darker theories, that the missing half had been deliberately hidden to erase traces of the killer, or perhaps to protect secrets she had carried. For Imran, it was simpler. His wife was dead, torn apart, and someone needed to pay. The police summoned him for questioning, their tone clipped but professional. "Mr. Imran, when was the last time you spoke with your wife?" He swallowed hard. "Months ago, before she left me. Before she went to him." The interrogator leaned forward. "You were aware she was staying with Sheikh Khalid?" Imran's jaw tightened. "Everyone knew, and everyone knows she never left that house of her own will." But the officer's eyes flickered with something unreadable, and Imran realized he was not just a grieving husband in their eyes. He was a suspect. When the questioning ended, Imran stepped outside to find journalists waiting like vultures. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved forward. "Mr. Imran, did you kill your wife? Were you jealous of Sheikh Khalid? Do you believe he's behind this?" Imran's throat constricted. He wanted to scream, to tear the microphones from their hands. Instead, he shoved through the crowd, his silence feeding their frenzy. Across town, Sheikh Khalid also found himself under the spotlight. The once untouchable businessman was suddenly a name wrapped in scandal, though his publicists released carefully worded statements. Sheikh Khalid is deeply saddened by the tragic news and denies any involvement. The air around him shifted. Smiles in public no low. Anger seemed as effortless. Every camera lingered too long on his face, searching for cracks. The narrative twisted into a grotesque tug-of-war. Was this the crime of a jealous husband? The silencing hand of a powerful sheikh? Or something murkier, tangled in both worlds? In the middle of it all lay Aisha's absence, made heavier by the haunting fact that half of her was still missing. Without the rest of her body, there were no answers, only speculation, rumors, and fear. That night, Imran sat alone, staring out at Dubai's glittering skyline. Somewhere in that glitter hid rot, and he would dig until he unearthed it. He owed her that much, no matter how broken their love had become. And as the city buzzed with theories, one chilling truth grew clearer. This was not just about Aisha's death. It was about power, control, and secrets that someone was willing to slice apart to protect. The hunt for the missing half had only begun. The city was still reeling from the discovery of Aisha's half-body when investigators quietly began peeling back the layers of Sheikh Khalid's world. On the surface, he was untouchable, a man of immense wealth, political connections, and polished public charm. But behind closed doors, his empire was stitched together with whispers, rumors of mistresses who vanished, of deals signed with intimidation, of women silenced before their voices reached daylight. Files that were never meant to be opened suddenly found their way into investigative hands. A missing Moroccan model, last seen entering Khalid's private villa. A domestic worker from the Philippines, reported missing after accusing a member of his household of abuse. Each case faded into silence back then, protected by influence and money. But now, with Aisha's remains stirring global headlines, those silences cracked like fragile glass. One investigator muttered under his breath while scanning the old files, "He's been doing this for years. Only difference is this one's half a body, not a ghost." Still, no case had ever stuck. Witnesses recanted. Families withdrew complaints. Evidence evaporated. Sheikh Khalid had mastered the art of erasure. While suspicion circled him, Imran found himself ensnared in a different kind of nightmare. Instead of sympathy, he was met with cold stares and probing questions. Many whispered that perhaps he had followed his wife to Dubai, his pride wounded, his rage spilling over into violence. Betrayal cuts deep, a TV anchor speculated. Could this be the act of a husband scorned? The words pierced Imran like daggers. He had loved Aisha in his own flawed, rigid way. Yes, he was controlling. Yes, they fought. But murder? To carve her in half? The thought made him sick. Yet grief left him powerless to defend himself. He replayed their last argument over and over, her words echoing in the dim hotel room. "You'll never understand me. You'll never give me the life I deserve." Then the slam of the door, the silence that followed, and months later, the half of her that remained. Detectives grilled him again. "Did you ever threaten her?" "No." "Did you know about her relationship with Sheikh Khalid?" "Yes. Everyone knew." "And how did that make you feel?" His silence became their answer. Every pause, every flicker of anger in his eyes became fodder for their suspicions. The more he denied, the deeper the doubt seemed to dig. Meanwhile, journalists tore apart both men's lives, splashing their faces across front pages. To the public, the story had become a grim spectacle. The powerful sheikh with his gilded secrets versus the betrayed husband with his wounded pride. Either could be the killer. Either could have ordered her mutilation. And in the middle was Aisha, desired, silenced, and now divided even in death. Imran sat one night scrolling through old photos of her, back when things were simpler. Her smile lit up their small Karachi apartment, her laughter filling rooms without luxury. Somewhere along the way, he had traded that life for promises of palaces. Now, he wondered bitterly, had she traded her life itself? But as the days passed, something darker became clear. If the investigation pressed too hard against Sheikh Khalid, it risked collapsing entirely. Political figures made quiet phone calls. Certain documents vanished again. The more the detectives dug, the more they realized how dangerous this pursuit could become. Imran felt the weight of it, how her truth was at risk of being buried forever, suffocated under influence and power. His grief began hardening into something sharper. He whispered into the night, staring out at Dubai's shimmering skyline, "If they won't bring her justice, I will." The truth was murkier than ever, but one thing was certain. Both men were being watched now, hunted not just by police but by the world. And somewhere in the shadows, the missing half of Aisha still held the answers. The investigation had reached a suffocating stalemate. Evidence evaporated, witnesses vanished, and powerful hands pulled invisible strings. But in the cracks of silence, fear sometimes leaked out, and it came in the form of a trembling man who finally broke his silence. His name was Karim, a former servant of Sheikh Khalid's household. He had been dismissed months earlier under mysterious circumstances, and now lived in hiding, terrified that Khalid's men might track him down. When investigators found him, he refused to speak at first, his eyes darting to every shadow in the room. Only after hours of persuasion and the promise of anonymity did the dam finally break. His voice quivered. "I saw what happened to her." The investigators leaned forward. "To Aisha?" Karim nodded, sweat glistening on his forehead. "She tried to leave. She begged him to let her go. She said she couldn't live in a cage anymore." The words hung heavy in the air. For weeks, rumors swirled that Aisha had grown restless, that she regretted the gilded prison she had stepped into. Now the whispers had a witness. Karim swallowed hard before continuing. "At first he laughed. He told her no one leaves him. He said she was his possession, not his wife, not his lover, his possession, and then—" His voice cracked. "He snapped." The room stiffened. Karim's hands shook as he clutched a glass of water. It happened late at night. No guests, only staff. He screamed at her, threw things. She screamed back. Then it went quiet. Too quiet. When I entered the hall, I saw her on the ground, bleeding. The investigator whispered, "And Sheikh Khalid?" Karim's eyes widened with terror. He stood over her, his face like he wasn't human anymore. He ordered everyone out. He told the guards to bring cloth, rich silk, the kind he always used to flaunt. They wrapped her, not all of her, just half. He said it was enough. He wanted the world to know what happens when someone defies him. The words froze the room. The ritualistic manner of the disposal now had a sinister explanation. It was not merely concealment, but a message. Karim leaned in closer, his whisper trembling. He told us, "Half her body for the world, half for me. Let them wonder. Let them fear." A chill swept across the investigators' spines. It explained the desert, the silk, the mutilation. It was not an accident or a desperate cover-up. It was deliberate, theatrical, and cruel. One officer pressed, "Why come forward now?" Karim looked down, tears spilling. "Because I hear her screams every night. I can't sleep. And because I know I'll die soon, whether I speak or stay silent. But maybe her truth won't die with me." The confession was transcribed, locked in sealed files. But even with Karim's testimony, doubt remained. Without the missing half of Aisha's body, without physical evidence, Khalid could deny it all. And he surely would. The justice system bent easily under the weight of his influence. That night, Imran was summoned to hear Karim's words firsthand. He sat in the dark corner of the room, fists clenched as the servant's trembling account unfolded. Each word was another knife, twisting deeper into his chest. She begged him to let her go. She said she couldn't live in a cage. He told her she was his possession. Imran's breathing grew ragged. The love he had once clung to, the anger he had wrestled with, the grief that consumed him, now all fused into something darker. He wanted blood. But even as his rage burned, the investigators warned him, "We may never bring this to court. Not without more evidence, not without the rest of her." Imran rose from his chair, his shadow stretching across the dimly lit wall. His voice was low, almost a growl. "Then I'll find her myself. All of her. And I'll make him pay." The investigators exchanged wary glances, unsure whether they had just unleashed a grieving husband or a man willing to become something far more dangerous. Outside, the city lights glittered, blind to the horrors hidden in its palaces. And somewhere in the night, half of Aisha still waited to be found. When Aisha's mutilated body became international news, the case grew too large to smother. Dubai's courts, normally silent under the weight of privilege, were forced into the spotlight. The world demanded justice. But justice in a city gilded by wealth and shadowed by politics was never simple. The trial was announced with all the spectacle of theatre. Reporters from London, New York, Karachi and beyond crowded the marble steps of the courthouse. Cameras flashed, pens scribbled, and headlines sharpened. "Will Sheikh face justice?" The stage was set, but the script was already stained with manipulation. Inside, Sheikh Khalid arrived draped in confidence. His white kandura shimmered under the fluorescent lights, his face calm, eyes sharp. He was not a man on trial. He was a ruler attending his own show. His lawyers flanked him like soldiers, files stacked high with rehearsed arguments. Imran sat on the opposite bench, shoulders stiff, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He had once been invisible, a middle-class man in Karachi. Now he was the grieving husband turned unwilling symbol, his every gesture dissected by cameras and whispers. The prosecution began cautiously, laying out the facts. Aisha's disappearance, the discovery of her half-body, the silk wrapping that traced back to Khalid's home. The tension in the courtroom thickened when Karim's statement was introduced, the servant's confession about what truly happened. Gasps rippled through the crowd as his words were read aloud. She said she couldn't live in a cage. He snapped. He said, half her body for the world, half for me. But when the defense rose, the air shifted. Khalid's lead attorney, a silver-haired man with a venomous tongue, dismissed the statement with a smirk. This so-called witness is nowhere to be found. Convenient, isn't it? A man with no face, no presence, no credibility. How do we even know he existed? Whispers filled the chamber. Karim had indeed vanished days before the trial, swallowed by fear or silenced by force. His absence hung like a curse over the prosecution's case. The defense pivoted swiftly, crafting a story as smooth as silk. Aisha, they argued, was unhappy in her marriage, reckless in her desires, and unstable in her decisions. She ran from one life to another, never satisfied, always chasing shadows. This was not a murder, the lawyer declared, voice echoing through the chamber. This was a tragic accident of a runaway wife who sought luxury and met misfortune in the wild. My client is no killer. He is a man whose generosity was abused, whose reputation now suffers because of the choices of another. Imran's fists clenched beneath the wooden bench. Rage bubbled in his chest, but he forced himself to remain still. When his name was called, he walked to the witness stand, his legs heavy as stone. The prosecutor asked gently, "Mr. Imran, what can you tell us about your wife?" He swallowed, his throat raw. She wanted more than I could give. She wanted freedom, beauty, wealth. I loved her, but I couldn't keep her. His voice trembled. But I know she didn't deserve this. No woman deserves to be cut in half and thrown into the desert like trash. The courtroom held its breath. The defense pounced. "Mr. Imran, did you ever argue with your wife about her choices?" "Yes." "Did you ever threaten her?" "No. Yet she left you, humiliated you, and then days later she was dead. Isn't it possible, sir, that it was you, driven by betrayal, who orchestrated this tragedy?" Imran's heart pounded. "I didn't kill her," he said firmly, though his voice cracked under the weight of the accusation. The lawyer's smile was thin and cold. "Of course you would say that." Gasps rippled through the room. The case that should have centered on Khalid was slowly being twisted into a drama of jealousy and revenge, with Imran painted as the shadowy villain. As the session adjourned, Imran stumbled out of the courthouse, cameras flashing in his face. The world that once saw him as a grieving husband now began to wonder if he was the hidden hand behind Aisha's death. And deep within the court's polished walls, Sheikh Khalid's faint smile lingered. He knew the game well. Truth was fragile, justice negotiable, and power always tipped the scales. The trial was far from over, but already the verdict felt poisoned. The courtroom was heavy with silence when the final verdict was read. Not guilty. Sheikh Khalid leaned back in his chair, expression carved into something smug yet untouchable, as though he had expected nothing less. His entourage whispered congratulations, the polished shoes of his lawyers clicking across the marble floor like the triumphant march of a conquering army. Cameras flashed, journalists shouted, and the world recorded the moment a man accused of unspeakable brutality walked free. For Imran, the words struck like a death sentence. He sat frozen on the bench, hands trembling, nails digging into his palms. Around him, the hum of the crowd blurred into a low roar, but all he could hear was Aisha's voice, her laughter echoing from the fragments of memory, her last words still unanswered, her mutilated half-body still haunting the desert sands. Justice had slipped through his fingers like water, leaving behind only salt and wounds. The servant who once risked everything to reveal the truth had vanished days before the trial began. Some whispered he was bought, others feared he was silenced forever. Without him, the prosecution faltered, their arguments stripped of the one living thread, that tied Khalid to Aisha's disappearance and gruesome fate. Evidence was reframed, testimonies twisted, and soon the narrative transformed. Khalid's team painted Aisha as restless, unstable, a woman who wandered into danger on her own. Her silk-wrapped corpse became nothing more than a tragic accident dressed in scandal. As Khalid left the courthouse surrounded by black cars and bodyguards, a cheer rose from his loyal supporters, drowning out the cries of protesters who still dared to demand justice. Imran caught sight of his enemy through the tinted glass of a limousine. Khalid's smirk reflected like a brand on his memory. For a fleeting second, rage burned so hot inside him that he thought of rushing forward, of ending it all with his bare hands. But then he remembered Aisha's gentle plea. "Don't lose yourself." And so he stood still, swallowed by grief, yet anchored by her ghost. The weeks that followed were a blur of emptiness. Imran returned home, his life stripped of direction, his once bright eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. Neighbors whispered, some pitying him, others secretly questioning if he had played a darker role in Aisha's end. Betrayal, suspicion and grief gnawed at him until his soul felt like glass cracked too many times. But through the pain, something heard. Hing's stubborn remained, an ember that refused to die. He began to write. At first, just fragmented notes scribbled in the dark. Memories of Aisha, the sound of her voice, the warmth of her hand in his. Soon those fragments grew into pages, and the pages into stories. He wrote of her beauty, her kindness, her struggles to free herself from a man who cloaked cruelty in wealth and power. He wrote of the silent servant, of the fabric that wrapped her half-body, of the courtroom that turned truth into illusion. His words became his rebellion, a way to keep her alive in a world determined to erase her. International journalists reached out, some curious, some cautious. Imran agreed to speak, though his voice cracked each time he uttered her name. "They took her body," he told them, "but they will never take her story." His words spread beyond Dubai, beyond Pakistan, beyond borders that tried to contain truth. In whispers and headlines, Aisha's name resurfaced, no longer just a victim but a symbol of every silenced woman trapped beneath the weight of power. Still, Imran knew the cost of defiance. His phone buzzed with threats. His door rattled with warning knocks in the night. Friends urged him to stop, to protect himself, to let grief fade into silence. But silence was what Khalid wanted. Silence was what had hidden the fates of the other women who had vanished around him. Silence was betrayal. And Imran refused to betray her again. Years later, when the desert winds swept across the dunes where half of Aisha's body was once found, her story lingered like a ghostly echo. Justice had been denied, yet truth remained, shattered, fragmented, but alive. Imran stood at her grave, eyes heavy with both sorrow and resolve. "They couldn't erase you," he whispered, "not while I breathe." And so the narrative closed not with victory, but with endurance. Aisha's laughter lived in memories, her tragedy lived in ink, and her truth lived in defiance. Against power, money, and politics, only fragments survived. But sometimes fragments were enough to haunt an empire. In the war between truth and power, it was not verdicts or verdict makers who endured, it was stories. And Aisha's, though buried in half a body, would remain eternal,